Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of the ESM Late Night Show. Tonight we got an especially interesting episode, as I'm going to be interviewing 12 different individuals about how they've been faring in the past two and a half months, really, of this quarantine crisis, and how they've been dealing with it. So I'll be asking them 3 questions. So, question number 1, what has been the toughest part about the last 2 months?
Well, Falan, the toughest part of the past 2 months was I didn't get to walk for graduation. They were doing something at NASCAR Speedway, but I don't even like NASCAR.
I would say the toughest part was the time that I had to face off with a Balrog in the mines of Moria.
I'd say the toughest part of the last 2 months, just not being around folk. Miss being around people. All I got is crops and my cows. Started dressing them up, giving them silly names. Mr. Beefery. Government decided that my candy factory was not essential. Well, Falan, I'd say the toughest part is knowing which experiment to unleash first.
I'm glad you asked that, Falan. The toughest part of the past 2 months would definitely be cutting my own son's arm off. It was not an accident.
Falan, let me tell you. I'd say the worst part of the past 2 months is the fact that I've been fired. Not many people flying planes these days. Being stuck in a metal tube, virus going around, not a good combination. The toughest part has just been this feeling of being so lost.
I would say the toughest part about the past 2 months has been trying to figure out how to work out. First I've been to press dog, then car, then house. I can't stop. Push-ups. I'm back.
Thanks for the coffee, cup of joe. I'd say probably the toughest part of being the cop in the past 2 months. Sometimes there's a full moon out. You never know what people are gonna do. Wait, it's not a full moon tonight, is it? It is? Oh, no. It's starting! Not again! I'm sorry, my love!
Injustice.
Question number 2. What is something that you've learned in the past 2 months?
Something I've learned is that even though you might be a jock or a cheerleader or, the president of the most awesome chess team ever, we're all in this together. We're different, but we're the same.
Something I learned was that if you just call upon the Eagles, they will pretty much fix all your problems. Maybe just do that at the beginning of your journey, of your quest, and you'll just fly straight into Mordor, drop the ring in, done deal. Is that so hard?
I've learned that I'm gluten and lactose intolerant, which is kind of ironic because I, run a dairy farm that also grows grain. Candy's bad for you? Contributes to obesity, diabetes, tooth decay? Did you know this? Something I've learned in the past 2 months is that even though you have an experiment that goes so well, Amazon still doesn't stick to 2-day delivery. I need those pods! My creation must be complete!
Something I've learned in the past 2 months is that even if you have the power to blow up planets, apparently you still can't win the war. Just one little exhaust port.
I've learned that even if you are licensed to fly a commercial airliner, you can still get 2 stars on Uber for driving too fast.
I can't drive 55, my friend. I feel the need for speed. You may feel like no one can see you, no one can find you. You still matter. Arnold Goodman, he needs friends. He needs something to hunt, something to kill.
Oh, the changes, they're happening again.
Something I've learned is that not everyone is scared of bats. Like me. Some people will even eat bats. Okay. Question 3. What's something that you're looking forward to in the next 2 months?
I'm looking forward to going to college and just being my own man, you know. I mean, sure, I'll be home for the holidays and, you know, for birthdays, and I'll be coming home every weekend so Mom can do my laundry. But I'm gonna be a new man.
I'm really looking forward to spending some time in the Shire with one Frodo Baggins.
Something I'm looking forward to is being around people again. I mean, shoot. Get on that farmersonly.com. Meet some people.
Getting the Oompa Loompas back in the factory. You know, really reducing their unemployment rate.
The release of my super virus!
But seriously, it's going to be great.
Something I'm really looking forward to is rebuilding the empire, snuffing out the light of all that is good and wholesome in this galaxy.
Looking forward to getting back in those skies. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking forward to finding myself in the midst of this crisis.
Really looking forward to being back in the gym with the iron. I will eat the plates for breakfast. I will punch the dumbbells in the stupid face. And I will own the gym once more! My parents are dead. Don't look at me crying.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all 12 of our guests for coming on the show today. Next week, we'll do something different.
Hey, Falan, check this out. Not graduated. Graduated. Not graduated. Graduated. Pretty cool, huh? You shall not pass!
Are there real people on this camera?
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Requesting permission for a flyby. Negative. The pattern is full.
This is not the quarantine that Gotham deserved. But it was the quarantine that Gotham wanted to need to deserve.
Well, good morning, guys, and welcome to another Sunday video lesson. Thanks for joining us this morning. Today, Jason's going to be preaching on more about Moses, and specifically more about Moses' time on Mount Sinai and the Ten Commandments. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to be preaching about because he tells me very little. But I know that we're in Exodus now. We are past the Israelites being in Egypt, and now we are to a moment where they are becoming their own people. They are be giving commandments from God about how to live their lives, and Moses is spending some time with God spending some FaceTime with God. And so we're in Exodus chapter 33 through 35. We're kind of all over the place. But today, I actually want to focus on a section of the New Testament that refers to Moses. Now, some of this will be familiar to y'all because this is actually a theme that we used for our high school retreat last year. We used this theme of FaceTime, and we used the story of Moses and how his spiritual journey, how he spent time with God, and how that transformed him. And we use that as a jumping off point about how we need to be looking at ourselves, about the time that we were giving to God and the time that we were giving to other things, such as social media. And that was a big theme for that weekend, was how we're using social media. If you guys remember, Dr. Ryan Smith was actually the one who was with us that weekend and speaking to us. So we're going to dive into that and do a quick reminder of what we talked about that retreat today. So let's start off by reading 2 Corinthians chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 12 through 18. Follow along with me. Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face to prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away. But their minds were made dull. For to this day, the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed, because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So, in case you're not familiar, back in the Old Testament, when Moses was leading the people of Israel, and he was going up to Mount Sinai to spend time with God, during his meetings with God, when he came back to the mountain, his face would be glowing so brightly from being in the presence of God. So much so that people were afraid of him and could not even look at him, so he had to put a veil over his face until it faded away again. And we use that story to talk about how throughout our daily walk, we have to be very intentional about how much FaceTime we are spending with God, because if we do decide to spend time with God, it's going to have an effect on us. So during the retreat from last spring, we talked about 3 different things. So we talked about input, we talked about output, and we talked about transformation. So number 1 was input. Obviously, we said how Moses was very intentional with his time that he spent with God, with his FaceTime with God. So intentional, in fact, that he had to climb a mountain every time he spent time with God on Mount Sinai. Now, the same is true for us, is that we have to be very intentional about what our input is. We were challenged at the beginning of that retreat. Ryan talks about what does your screen time look like. A lot of you have something on your phone that tells you how much time you give to maybe even each individual app on your phone, and the hours that people share that they were on YouTube or Instagram or whatever it was staggering. A lot of time given into these things. And so we spent some time talking through that and about how we could be intentional with, number 1, when we are giving time to those social media platforms, that we're doing it in a wise way, in a healthy way. And number 2 is just reducing that time that we spend on our screens overall. So we have to be very intentional with our input. And then we challenge them to think about your input, how your input dictates your output. If we want to be people of God, if we want to be living our life in such a way that is full of love and with wisdom and truth, we have to recognize that what we put in, the time that we spend time doing things, that's going to affect our output. That's going to affect the way that we talk to people, the way we interact with people. It's going to affect our behaviors, our ideas, our thoughts, our words. All of these things are affected by our input. And so we encourage people to be thinking about their output. Moses' output was definitely changed once he started spending more time with God. Not only was he chosen to be this leader and did some miraculous things with God's power when he went to visit Pharaoh, but also the output of just going and bringing back down the 10 Commandments. That was the law of the land for hundreds of years. Amazing things that God did through Moses. His output was dramatically increased because of his input. In the same way, we have to think about, what is our output? What is our fruit? Is essentially what we're asking. What is your fruit? How are you bearing fruit for Christ? How are you showing people that Christ is so important to you that it changes the way that you act? It changes the things that you do. It changes the way that you spend your time. And all of this comes down to transformation. If we were to look at Moses' whole life story, we talked about this last week. Moses goes from a baby who has to be sent down a river to being a prince of Egypt, to being an outcast and a murderer, to being a shepherd, to being the leader of a nation, the liberator of God's people, the Israelites. Talk about a transformational story. Moses made him to be a leader, a hero even, because he was intentional with his input. He let that dictate his output, and he was transformed. I would challenge you guys in the midst of this pandemic, this crisis that's going on, to be very intentional with your input. Be looking at your screen time. Try to put limits on it. In fact, for the month of June, let's try charging our phones in the living room. Do that. Charge your phone in the living room at night. Don't charge it next to your bed. See how it changes the way that you sleep. See how it changes the maybe the emphasis that you put on your phone, and maybe let your screen time go down. Maybe that's it. Maybe you need to put a goal on how much screen time you put. Maybe set yourself a limit of an hour a day, or maybe 30 minutes of YouTube a day. Put limits on yourself. Give yourself boundaries so that we can be having a healthy amount of FaceTime with things that aren't God, but also let's be making healthy goals for ourselves with how much FaceTime we are giving to God. I know all of you probably have Post-it notes somewhere in your house. After this lesson, go find a Post-it note, write down, spend time with God in the morning. Write down, read my Bible at night before bed. Write down a goal to be more intentional with the amount of time that you give to God. Guys, the more time we spend with God, the more that our faces will change. We will literally start to be made into his image, which is the image we were made from in the very beginning. I challenge you to reduce your screen time. Maybe put some limits on how much time you can spend on each app. Charge your phone in a different room at night, and give yourself some goals. Use Post-it notes, use whatever you can. Give yourself specific goals on how to spend more time with God. Guys, thanks for listening today. And remember, you might be alone, but we're alone together.